Are you having a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, or crazy dreams, or you just aren't feeling well rested despite a full night's sleep? Do you feel like it's your mind, or is it your body that's keeping you awake, or maybe both? These are all questions we're going to dive into on this week's episode, which unpacks sleep from a Chinese medicine perspective. Chinese medicine is an ancient indigenous system of healing which was developed through the study of energy systems within the body. Personally, I've found this lens of viewing the body to be both enlightening and clarifying. It just makes sense. It's safe to say that all forms of medicine, whether it's Eastern, Western, holistic, allopathic, etc., would agree that sleep is one of the most important functions of, maybe I would argue, the most important function of the human body. If you're not sleeping, your body will struggle and eventually fail to fully function. Chinese medicine is so effective for treating sleep disorders because its system of pattern diagnosis and treatment are entirely unique to the person. So on this episode, we dive into the roots, the branches, and the varied patterns within sleep disorders. Highlights from this episode. I unpack the role of the main organ energy pathways, also known as meridians, involved in sleep: the heart, the liver, and the kidneys. I talk about the perspective that Chinese medicine has towards the spirit and the soul and how it divides it into 5 sort of characters or pieces, and how those characters contribute to our sleep quality and our dreams. I go over the unique system of the Chinese medicine clock and how it can help you get better sleep. And at the end, I share about common herbal formulas used to treat common sleep disorders. I want to take a moment to say thank you so much to those of you who asked your questions for me on Instagram. It helped me have direction and knowing how can I help here. So thank you. And I also want to give a bit of a caveat here that I am really only just scratching the surface when it comes to Chinese medicine and sleep. So there's a lot of great information here, but just know that this is a part of the whole. If you would like to work with me, whether that's sleep or whatever else it may be, you can find all of my information in the show notes. If you're in West Palm Beach and would like to receive treatment from the clinic that I'm currently working at, you can find that information in the show notes. And I also work remotely with people in terms of lifestyle counseling, food therapy, herbal medicine. So if that's something else that you would want to go into, again, show notes, reach out. Thank you for being here, and I'll let you get into it. Welcome to the School of Whispers podcast. This is your host, Stephanie. I'm a licensed acupuncture physician and herbalist with a background in psychology, health sciences, and exercise physiology. Within my own spiritual awakening, I found myself learning pivotal lessons when I got myself to be in silence. Within that silence, the whispers came through. This is my sacred space of vulnerable storytelling where my guests and I share about the magic that comes from a life of following these whispers. I'm grateful you made it here, and I hope this show inspires you to live a life of following your own whispers. Let's get into the show. Hello, welcome back to the show, the Sleep Podcast. This is probably the latest I've ever recorded a podcast. I'm usually pretty useless after 8 p.m. So it's 9:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we're going to get right into it. So sleep from a Chinese medicine perspective. Well, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Chinese medicine, I think the best way to explain or to encourage you to look at the body from this perspective. So I was trained in traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM. So I'll be saying CM or TCM often throughout the show. But what's really a great way to look at it is through the lens of this great book that was the first book that just made me fall in love with Chinese medicine. And it's called The Web That Has No Weaver. So in TCM, we're not concerned with figuring out what is that one thing. Where can we put the blame and change or get rid of that one thing that is making you suffer or struggle and be in a state of dis-ease? We actually don't even do Western diagnosis. Any sort of, like if somebody tells me they have insomnia and they ask me for a treatment and an herbal formula, that would mean nothing to me. I wouldn't be able to give you a treatment or a formula without asking further questions, because what we're always looking for is the pattern. What is the pattern right now at hand? That's the web. And it's a web that has no weaver. So what that means is we're not concerned with trying to figure out how to extract that one thing that's causing the problem. There is no one thing ever, truly. Like when my patients say, like, what do you think it is that's making me worse? Or what do you think that is that's getting me better? I always say I don't know. Like it's never that one thing. It's always going to be all the little things that you may be aware of what you're doing or unaware of what you're doing, your relationships, your environment, your diet, your lifestyle, your history, where you're headed, your job. All of these factors are contributing. And actually, so right now I'm seeing this really talented herbalist out in Melbourne, Dr. Ni, and he's from China. He's this older man. I really couldn't put a number though on how old he is. He's just like as old as dirt and also extremely youthful and lively. So, but we talk about the importance of asking the question, what is currently happening within the body's internal environment, internal pattern, that's bringing it to a state of disharmony as it exists within the external world? I think a great example would be looking at a family that's living in a house with mold. There's always that one person that just cannot tolerate it, and they're like the canary in the coal mine of like, they're realizing, oh, this person's not getting better. Maybe there's mold in the house, blah, blah. But there's a reason why that one person in the family cannot tolerate the mold environment, yet everyone else in the family is doing all right. And that reason is due to the internal pattern. Another example could be COVID, like how COVID literally killed people. And then for other people, everyone else around them was testing positive, sick as a dog. They tested positive, yet they had no symptoms. In Chinese medicine, we don't care at all about the nature of the virus, really, like maybe to a certain degree. But what we really care about is what is the pattern inside that's enabling these symptoms to show up. And from there, we can address the pattern and reweave the web. I hope you're picking up what I'm putting down. The last thing I want to touch on before I really get into sleep is, with Chinese medicine, one of the first questions we ask ourselves when we are faced with a pattern to diagnose is this yin in nature or yang in nature? Yang, if you will, but I say yang. I've had it beat into me to say yang. So I've touched on yin and yang a lot on the show. And so I'll do it briefly again here for anyone who's brand new to this concept. And I think most of us have a general idea, right? But to just quickly go over yin and yang from a Chinese medicine perspective, well, first off, we have to understand that one cannot exist without the other. They are in a constant state of transformation into each other, stealing or consuming each other, and just influencing each other in general. And because they are this duality, again, like yin does not exist without the existence of yang, and vice versa. Another thing that we need to understand about yin and yang is, while balance is always the goal, it's just not That's just not how we roll. We're always in a state of flux, seeking harmony within the disbalance. So I used to be really big on like finding balance, but now I actually recently read this TCM book and they talk about finding harmony within the pattern. And so I love that. We're going to roll with that. Yin is soft, curved. It is the front of the body. Think of like your soft and squishy bits. It is nighttime. It is cooling. It is heavy. When I talk to patients about trying to help them understand their pattern at hand, I'll often give the comparison of a hot air balloon, where the basket with the weights, that is the yin for the hot air balloon. That is the yin in the body. It keeps things anchored. It is the things that we can see. So our blood is very yin in nature. On the other hand, yang is fiery. It's constantly moving. Yin is holding and very slow moving. And yang is the things that we can't really see. Usually chi, our life force energy, is a great representation of yang because you can't see it, but boy, you can feel it. And it's of the spirit. So things that don't have like this heaviness in nature are in that constant state of flux and movement and transformation. And with that hot air balloon analogy, oh, and of course in heating, like as I get into this analogy here, the yang is the fire that enables the air balloon to rise. So when there's a disbalance of yin or yang, maybe the yin there's too much in the body and it's just dragging that hot air balloon down and it's unable to take off. Or on the other hand, say if there's not enough weights in the basket, and so that yin isn't able to keep the fire under control from rising, and heat, yang, it rises in the body, and we'll get into that on a deeper level in a moment. But there's also scenarios where the fire is just too big. Like we've got plenty of weight in the basket, but the fire is just way too big and all consuming, and the air balloon just goes off into the distance. So that's my quick crash course on yin and yang. I feel like that's enough information for you to roll with me here. And of course, I'll touch base on the philosophy as we keep going. So sleep is, as we all know, very important. When I am working with somebody, and every time I see them, the first questions I ask is, how's sleep? How's digestion? How's stress? If someone's not sleeping, they're not going to get better. And so whether you have shoulder pain or issues with fertility or your period or digestion, stress, whatever it may be, to a degree in the session, I will address those little things. But the big main thing for me will be addressing sleep, making sure that you can sleep so that your body can recover and heal. I feel that if I can get somebody to sleep within the session, I feel completed. I feel like I've done my job, because for me, when somebody's chi can flow freely while the needles are in, and without the mind obstructing and getting in the way, then that's just like the optimal way to be. So let's talk a little bit about chi flow in the body. So our chi, it flows within a layer. We're always talking about in Chinese medicine, like outermost layers and middle, innermost layers. And so during the day, our chi flows within our outermost layers, our life force energy. That layer that is the outermost, that we call it the Su Li. And it's never easy to create a Western equivalent here, but you could compare it to the lymphatic system, maybe a little bit of the immune system and the nervous system as well. It's that outermost layer that takes in the world. So life force during the day travels. It actually travels in a very certain pattern, and that's based off of a clock system. So there's a lot to get into with this clock system, but the main organs that are
activated during the day are the large intestine, stomach, spleen, heart, small intestine, bladder. And that's usually where it stops. The large intestine is around like 5 a.m. And then we get into the stomach around 7 to 9, spleen 9 to 11, heart 11 to 1, small intestine 1 to 3, bladder 3 to 5. And then we get into more of the organs that have to do with sleep. But to pause there, I want to just say too that our qi, it circulates through our su li, this outermost layer, within 30-minute increments. That's typically why an acupuncture treatment will at most be about 30 minutes long, because usually at that point, the needles have done their job. The circulation has been completed. And I'll link in the show notes a post that I will put on in my Instagram so you can get a visual of this clock. But as we get in towards the evening from 5 to 7, it's the kidney time. 7 to 9, the pericardium, which is in Chinese medicine, we call it the envoy for the heart. It's that muscle that wraps around the heart organ itself, but there's a massive energetic quality of protection and communication to it. From 9 to 11, we call it the triple burner or the sanjiao. That is all about transformation of things. We have the upper burner, which is the chest and the head, the middle burner, the digestive system, the lower burner, which is the urinary tract, as well as the reproductive organs and the kidneys. So this triple burner, it signifies the three main energy centers in the body: upper, middle, lower. It's a really interesting organ pathway when you get deeper into it, which I won't do here, but I would say that a Western equivalent could be our metabolism. And then from 11 to 1, we have the gallbladder, 1 to 3, the liver time, at 3 to 5, the lung time. The 1 to 3 and 3 to 5, I think, are the most well known within this Chinese medicine clock, because that's usually the time that everyone is typically, if they're waking up around those times. So I'm not going to dive much deeper into the clock system. Again, if you want to check it out, you could look in the show notes and find the post will be there eventually. And what I love about this clock in particular is that it has little notes underneath to give you some insight into what's happening with your body during that time of day. And I think this is just a great reference point to understand where there is disbalance, and especially with sleep. Okay, let's get into organ theory. Let's talk about the main organs that are involved with sleep. Before I do, the big caveat that I give everybody when it comes to Chinese medicine is when I talk about the organs, I'm not talking about them from a Western point of view. So I'm not exactly referring to the physical substance, amalgamation of cells, if you will, that creates the heart and the liver and the kidneys. Talking about the energetic pathways, right? Because in China, fun fact, in China, it was illegal to do autopsies. It was something that was probably done underground, but the way that their medical system was developed was through a system of understanding the energy of the body and how it runs, which is just next level to me. So deeply fascinating that. Okay, I pause. I stop myself there. If you want me to get deeper into just the fascination with the history, with any, I'll check out the show notes. I'll give you a nice list of all the Chinese medicine podcasts that I've done. The one that I in particular go into the philosophy and the history would be the Whispers of Qigong. Yeah, or it's like finding balance or something like that. You'll find in the show notes. So the main organ pathways, energetic pathways, meridians, if you will, that are involved with sleep are the heart, liver, and kidney. There is also involvement of the lung and the spleen. I'll touch on those a little bit, but usually if there's something going on with the lungs and the spleen, why they're relevant towards sleep is the fact that they will influence the pattern of dis-ease within the heart, the liver, and the kidney. So let's talk about the heart. We call the heart the emperor in Chinese medicine. The heart is such a sensitive, aware, informative, and wise little energetic being within your chest. And it is responsible for, surprise, surprise, circulating blood. And I'll touch on that in a moment, but is also responsible for housing the shen. So the shen in Chinese medicine, well, let's backtrack a little bit. In Chinese medicine, they see the soul and the spirit very different from the way that a Judeo-Christian based idea of the soul and spirit, or just any sort of modern version of spirituality. There's really no God within the main philosophy of Chinese medicine, which is Taoism, or the Taoism. If you're familiar with the show, you know I've touched on the Tao quite a few times, and it's one of those things that the more you try to explain it, the less you grasp an understanding of it. It's something we experience within everything every day. It is the way of the universe, and it is the source of life itself. And so there's no sort of anthropomorphization of the Tao being like this deity. And so there's not really like a typical concept of a soul. In Chinese medicine, they break down the spirit, the soul, into 5 pieces. And so the piece of the spirit that is relevant to the heart is the shen. The shen is responsible for taking in the world and making sense of it. I think about this study that was done that measured the electromagnetic field of the heart, and it can go out as far as 3 to 10 feet. It's like when somebody walks in the room and you can feel their energy before you even speak to them, before you're even a foot away from them. That's the energy of their heart that you can feel. Yes, it's like, you could look at it from this spiritual lens, but literally it's an electromagnetic field that emits from the body. There's proven science to it. We also call the shen the emperor. It has a very precious, important role in the body, but it's not the one that, like, it has envoys. As I mentioned, like the pericardium is envoyed. So the emperor isn't the one who's responsible for carrying out every task. The role of the emperor is to oversee, to unify, and ensure order. Just as the emperor sets the tone for the entire kingdom, the state of the shen determines the harmony of or chaos within the entire person. I would really love to dive deeper into what the shen is, but I feel like that warrants an entire podcast. The plan for this season, as I close out, as we get closer towards the winter, is to have a podcast on the different spirits within Chinese medicine. So we'll dive deeper into that another time. But the last thing I'll say is the shen at night, it is supposed to rest in the heart. But because the shen is very closely tied to, and it has characteristics similar to the element of fire, as I mentioned earlier with the hot air balloon analogy, usually if there's a sense of restlessness or crazy dreams or issues, then the shen is going to be a huge factor within that. So the shen is very sensitive to being overheated, whether that's through diet, through lifestyle, overthinking, things like that, emotional disturbance, trauma. It's also susceptible to being restless and flaring. So a really common treatment principle in Chinese medicine is to calm the Shen. And a really common pattern of disbalance is Shen disturbance. So we're always looking at Shen disturbance due to what? And I'll get into that in a moment, but I want to talk a little bit more about what Shen disturbance can look like from a sleep point of view. It can look like difficulty falling asleep, restless, wild dreams. I'll get more into that in a second, as well as frequent waking up. Usually it's going to be waking up due to a restless mind. And actually, I just pulled up right now the questions because I asked on Instagram for you guys to tell me a little bit about your sleep experience. And we've got, questions on how to calm a ruminating mind when waking, struggle staying asleep, getting deep sleep, wild dreams that they don't feel well rested. And really, like, staying asleep seems to be, and crazy dreams seems to be the common pattern here amongst all of you who responded to my question. And thank you guys for doing that. It gave me some good direction in how to help and how to make this information relevant to you. So let's talk about dreams for a moment. First I want to say that there's nothing pathological about having dreams. It's not a bad thing to have dreams. However, the nature of your dreams will definitely reveal to me of where can I create more harmony within the body. So if you're having dreams that are just about things, people, places, and things that are relevant in your life, they are very emotional and you're remembering them. You remember details within these dreams because the heart, the Shen, governs memory. Then that is an example of insomnia due to Shen disturbance, due to some sort of disbalance in the heart. So let's talk a little bit about the pathway of the heart. So of course it travels through the heart organ itself in the chest, this heart meridian. It also connects to the throat, eyes, and tongue and goes down the arm to the little finger. So if I'm palpating somebody, if I'm taking their pulse, or I just happen to see their forearms and the inside of their forearms are really tight and turgid, I'll probably ask them how is their sleep or how are they doing emotionally. And say if there's a case where I'm just not quite getting there with my pattern diagnosis and with the needles and getting them to help with the insomnia, then I'll probably address the heart channel itself and I'll work on releasing the scapula through the armpit, opening up the inside of the arms, and maybe getting a gua sha tool and scraping the underside of the forearms. Usually if somebody's not getting better for an internal pattern, I'll have to pivot and address the body a little bit more than I would the energy, and vice versa. If I'm working on somebody's pain pattern and it's musculoskeletal and I'm focusing on that, but they're just not getting better, then I will probably pivot and again ask those questions. How's your sleep? How's your stress? How's your digestion? And then usually from there, the person gets better. All of it is connected, right? It's all just a full body picture here. So another example where you may be having a heart channel specific imbalance with trouble sleeping or getting quality sleep is having heart palpitations or a racing heart, or really just feeling it. You should not really be super focused on feeling your heart in your chest. So this is a function of the autonomic nervous system. If you're aware of every heartbeat, I think that would cause Shen disturbance to the best of us. Any difficulty with speech or racing thoughts, swelling of the tongue, bitter taste in the mouth, sleep talking, that again is a heart pattern. And then feeling a sensation of restless eyes, or again, being in that disturbed dream state. That again is going to point towards a heart channel disbalance. But as you'll soon learn is something involved with the eyes could also mean a liver channel disbalance. So it's It's always hard to exactly pinpoint, right? It's back to that web that has no weaver reference. It's a big old web, and it's hard to pinpoint who is the culprit for the web at hand. And then we'll close out this I wish I could go deeper. It's just tough, guys, to do this within a podcast. But to close out our conversation about the heart, let's talk about circulation of blood and yin. So I mentioned earlier that our qi circulates within the su li during the daytime. Well, at night, what happens is our qi, it goes deeper into the internal layers of our body, and it's stored within certain organs. So if the qi is unable to be stored within these organ energy centers, then you're going to have a hard time sleeping. And as I mentioned earlier too, when I talked about yin, our blood is a very strong yin substance. It helps anchor the body. And they say that the qi is the commander of blood. So where qi goes, blood flows. So if the qi is unable to be stored into the main energy centers, then neither is the blood. And our blood is supposed to be stored deep in within the body for rejuvenation and replenishment. And so when it's unable to do that, again, you're going to have a hard time staying asleep. It's like with the qi being obstructed with its circulation, I think there's more of an issue falling asleep. And then when the blood is unable to be stored, there's an issue staying asleep. And so the heart, as I mentioned, is responsible for the circulation of blood and thus the circulation of yin. If there's not enough adequate nourishment to the heart, how do we get nourishment? Well, to start from the food we eat, so especially red colored foods, but like specifically meat. If someone's a vegetarian and they're having really bad insomnia, it's a challenge. Usually I have to get them on some sort of supplement routine or herbal protocol immediately. I don't like to prescribe herbs immediately for people because I like to see how their pattern goes, but it's pretty simple if they're a vegetarian and they're not sleeping. That means they're blood deficient. So if anything, I guess the good news there is like it's pretty clear what's going on, and if they trust me, if there's rapport there and they want to dive into herbs, I'm going to try to get them on an herbal protocol so that they can get some sleep. So if the blood is deficient, then the Shen, our spirit, has no bed to rest in or no hearth to lie within. So symptoms: insomnia, a light sleep, or waking up easily. There's a lot more I could say about that, but we'll pause there and then we'll just talk briefly about the time for the heart. So it's actually from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So while the heart has this really strong role with sleep, it's one of the first things we look at if there's insomnia. It's interesting to me that it's from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's where, where the heart has the strongest influence. That's actually going to be one of the best times for me to treat insomnia. And that's when our energy is the highest, right? So we should be reaching this crescendo of peak energy without having a massive drop between the hours of 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. During this time of day, we're probably eating lunch. We're probably having our first or our second cup of coffee. And what you do here is going to have an influence on how your quality of sleep is. Something that I constantly see in our society is overdoing it with the coffee. So coffee is an herb. It is an herb that goes straight to the heart pathway. So if somebody's Shen disturbed, somebody's having insomnia, then, I'm going to ask them about coffee because it's more than just the caffeine. It's even if you're having decaf, what's happening is this herb is stimulating the heart meridian. And if you're already overstimulated here, it's not going to be really doing you any favors. So I'm always trying to encourage people, and coffee is so addicting. So I'm always trying to encourage people to have different forms of caffeine within their lives to keep their heart pathway from being overstimulated, overrun. And to have a mini tangent on caffeine, when someone's fatigued, that isn't really the thing that I recommend or I go for in order to help them combat and change that pattern of fatigue. Caffeine doesn't really change much with the body. What it does is I mean, for the long run, short term, it masks the body from being able to recognize that it's tired. So the question is why are you tired? And that's what this whole podcast is here to answer. But yeah, there are herbs, there are supplements, there are so many things that you can do that can actually make like I have caffeine maybe once or twice a week. And yes, I get tired. And yes, I have so many different ways to address that fatigue throughout the day and help make sure that I have a boost of energy when I need it. And I guess the last thing I want to mention about this is usually where I see people having a crash of energy throughout the day, whether it's because they skipped breakfast and they finally are eating, and they're probably eating something that's spiking their blood sugar, or maybe they're having a lunch that's super carb heavy and then they get that dip, crash, and siesta hour comes in. If only we could all have siesta hour in our society, but we don't. And so what we do during these hours of 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. will have a strong influence on the heart. So whether you're not eating enough, you're not eating high density, nourishing foods, actually a little hack that you could do is pomegranate is something that has a really beautiful influence on our heart blood. And so I always recommend, usually I recommend taking 4 ounces in the evening before bed, but during this time where the heart is highly influenced by our outside world, have some pomegranate juice. That's a great way to gently stimulate the heart channel to help raise energy, boost circulation without having something like coffee all day, every day. Like there's nothing wrong with coffee. It's just having something every single day in excess that causes disharmony. So you're struggling to sleep, this is your sign. Be mindful with what you are doing between the hours of 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Okay, let's get into the liver. So the liver is known as the general. It is responsible for circulating qi and holding blood. So the liver is what tells our life force energy, you go do this, you go there, you do that. So in the evening, the liver is the one who's responsible for calling in our life force from those outermost layers to the innermost energy centers. It is also responsible for storing and holding the blood. We say that our blood is stored in the liver when we sleep. I know that's like kind of a weird concept to people. Also, to just add to it, we say that our menstrual blood is held by the liver. So usually if there's an issue with sleep or menstruation, we're going to look at the liver as well. Any sort of disbalance with the liver is going to affect our ability to fall asleep, stay asleep, and how you feel when you wake up. I know a lot of this is super repetitive, like falling asleep, staying asleep, but like to me, it's worth repeating to really hammer in that it's all interconnected. I'm not going to even get into the 5-element theory, which is just all about like sequences of energy passing through each other and influencing each other, insulting each other, generating each other. That's just how things run energetically through the body, and that's how we roll with Chinese medicine. Okay, so the storage of blood allows for replenishment. This storage function allows the heart to be calm and the shen to be at rest because all that blood's no longer pumping as intensely through the heart. It's being stored to rest. So if the liver is blood deficient, A lot of things can cause blood deficiency. Having excess bleeding from your period, a traumatic episode of loss of a lot of blood, hemorrhoids, really just like any loss of blood in general. It can influence and create a pattern called liver blood deficiency. So if the liver blood is deficient, what do you know? The Shen won't be anchored. But let's talk about the spirit division of the liver, because this is super relevant in Chinese medicine as well, and that's called the Hun. So the Hun is also known as the ethereal body. It's that part of our soul that likes to astral travel into the realms. So talking about dreams here, so as I mentioned with the heart again, just to recap, the heart is more relevant towards very emotionally disturbing dreams or emotionally based dreams that have to do with relevant people, places, and things in our lives. So when we go into the Hun now, this astral spirit, dreams that are associated with that make me look more towards the liver pattern are ones that are just wild and crazy. You feel like you're traveling through different dimensions, and it's just so random and borderline silly on what's happening. It has no real relevance to everyday life. That is a sign that the liver blood is deficient and the Hun needs to be anchored to the body. And I will, towards the end of this episode, talk about some herbal formulas that, well, I don't recommend that you diagnose yourself. Only a fool diagnoses themselves, as my practitioner loves to remind me, as well as all the truly like the masters within this medicine. Only a fool diagnoses yourself. But also it can be dangerous because these herbs, they are very strong and they're no joke. They are very effective, and also they can create further disbalance if you're not well versed. So I like to give you options so that you can study and you can be aware that there are options out there to help you find better sleep that aren't like hardcore pharmaceuticals. And one of the most important massive differences here is that not many people understand is these herbal protocols are not designed to keep you on them forever. They're designed to change your pattern. So if you're having insomnia due to liver blood deficiency, then we're targeting your liver blood. We're using the herbs to supplement and help rewire and re-harmonize and recalibrate your body so that you don't have this prone pattern towards liver blood deficiency. It of course depends how chronic it is, but I don't really see people on herbs for more than 2 to 3 months, like if they're very consistent and not experience a massive change in their entire lives. But also just be wary, right? So because of this storage function of the liver, if somebody feels like they're sleeping a ton but they're not having good quality sleep, then that's going to direct me towards what's going on with the liver. Why is the blood and the qi not being properly stored and replenished? And again, it's just usually it's going to lead towards the pattern of liver blood deficiency, but also liver qi stagnation. Liver qi stagnation is such a typical pattern in society because it's a very emotionally based pattern. Our qi is so easily governed by our emotions. And I really want to get into a tangent on fascia and how it's an emotional body, but I won't. I'm going to have to do a course on sleep and just pour my little heart out to you on everything that I think about and connect the dots with to treat sleep. But today, we're just going to get through the basics so that you can get a basic understanding and work from there. Okay, so the last characteristic that leads me towards a liver pattern that I'll mention here is if somebody's having a hard time staying asleep or falling asleep because Their bodies feel very rigid, especially within their joints and the muscles, but mostly the tendons. The liver has more of an influence within our tendons and our ligaments, which is around our joints. I am actually a person with this pattern. At certain points within my cycle, I have a real hard time staying asleep, and I am hypermobile within my joints, so I often rely on my tendons if I'm not conscious to keep my body to function, to lift, move heavy objects, or to walk throughout the day. I'm like very tendon joint heavy if I'm not careful. And so for me, I have to really work on nourishing my earth element, which influences my muscles. But to digress here is if I'm not doing so well in that department, keeping up with my exercise and just being conscious, or I'm overstretching, then I will, in the middle of the night, wake up and feel like this cramping sensation in my tendons and feel like I have to stretch my limbs out wide, and it's just never enough. So if you're somebody whose body is keeping them awake, I'm probably going to jump towards liver. Something else that feels relevant to touch on within the liver is it has a really strong influence within the eyes. The liver channel, similar to the heart channel, goes through the chest and the throat, but the liver channel goes to the eyes. So what that means in terms of sleep is, what are you watching before bed? Blue light is a vibrational frequency that disrupts natural rhythms within the body. There's just no way around it. So if you want, you can, honestly, I'm not on the red light glasses train, but I think that's a really great way to do it. Minimal overhead lighting throughout the day, as well as in the evening, especially fluorescent lighting, because that's going to create an erratic, ungrounded feeling within the liver channel. And just be wary of how much you consume throughout the day. If you're hypersensitive to light, even when your eyes are closed, like moi, actually, fun fact, women tend to have stronger sensitivity to light, and so it's really important to sleep in a pitch black bedroom. And there's actually an explanation that's based within the microbiome for that. But to stick with Chinese medicine, if your liver is stagnated and inundated and just sluggish, not doing so hot, you may feel like this sense of overwhelm behind your eyes, whether that manifests as dryness, teary eyes, or hypersensitivity to light. So blackout curtains, wearing an eye mask, limiting your screen time till up to a certain period, those are all things that can help your liver out a little bit when it comes to its big role within sleep. Last thing I'll touch on with the liver is its time of day, which is 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. So this is where we're supposed to be in deep sleep. We're supposed to be detoxing the blood, rest and recovery. And so if the general isn't strong enough to call the troops in, then the troops are going to be partying all night. Also, if you are working in a job that is night shift, that's going to have a huge influence on the liver channel, and usually lead to things like qi stagnation, liver yin deficiency, liver blood deficiency, especially when it comes to women. If there's a liver pattern going on, especially within yin and blood, there's going to be something that's going to be off within your hormones. I mean, that felt silly to say because any sort of disbalance is going to be hormone related, but I'm thinking more of just the classic case of a woman who's experiencing dysmenorrhea. So it's a dysfunction within her cycle, or dysfunction within menopause. So if you're waking up between the time of 1 to 3 a.m., then that's a liver pattern. Okay. Moving on to our final main organ associated with sleep, the kidneys. So the kidneys is our source of primordial yin, primordial yang, primordial water, primordial fire. So what does that mean? It's like the root of the essence that is you. And actually the kidneys is what carries our essence. We also call it Jing in Chinese medicine. We use our essence to create life, to create anything. And also our essence is what kind of makes us like vivacious and youthful and juicy and radiant, in my opinion. So it's an important organ energy center and pathway for sure. So the kidney is actually what's responsible for anchoring the heart and anchoring the liver and preventing our yang energy, that internal fire, from rising. The kidneys in general, they are associated with the water element, and it's known to have this relationship with softening and descending. So if there's a dysfunction within the kidney channel, there's going to be a dysfunction within the heart, within the liver, and all these things. And the yang is going to rise and all that not so fun stuff. So when our kidney waters, our kidney yin is deficient, someone would experience restlessness, difficulty falling asleep, night sweats, and vivid dreams. So in my school, we didn't really talk too much about kidney specific dreams, but just vivid dreams in general, whether it's the heart or the liver, is going to have an association with the kidney. But also if somebody is having dreams where they're running from something and there's a lot of fear and adrenaline involved, then that's going to point towards the kidney yin usually being deficient. So with kidney yang deficiency, on the other hand, there's an experience of feeling really cold in the body, feeling heavy, slow, and having excessive sleep without feeling well rested when waking up. A really common pattern that I just love the name of it. I love diagnosing it, and it's there's a really great formula for it. Is called the kidney and the heart not communicating. So as I mentioned, the kidney is that water element and the heart is the fire element. So these two elements need to be in constant communication so that they can function at their best capacity. So if the kidney is having a hard time storing our yin and our essence, that should be rising to cool and anchor the heart. There's an energetic line that runs between the kidney and the heart. Typically, cooling waters doesn't really rise, but for the kidney in this scenario, it needs to keep the heart fire from flaring too much. And that's what happens if it doesn't rise. Then we have this pattern called heart fire, and it is just impossible to sleep when you have heart fire. The mind is racing. You may have a little bit of like a lapse in your like grasp in reality. Sometimes it's like a little bit of a mania. Actually, for me, something that in the past has induced heart fire is too much cacao. And I love cacao. But again, here we are in this scenario where I was having it like every freaking day because I freaking love cacao. And it is chocolate just in general, or cocoa, cacao. It has a really strong influence on the heart channel, right? We know most of us know that it's a heart opener. And so we're having too much of that daily, then you're inundating, right? I'm repeating myself, but heart fire, it was a very interesting pattern for me because I was not sleeping, yet I was able to like function at a level of like really high energy throughout the day without experiencing any sort of anchoring. So that was a perfect scenario where my kidney and my heart were not able to communicate because my heart was way too jubilant, if you will. It was way too involved in taking the outside world and making sense of it and bringing it in. Another thing I want to touch on within the kidney is its role in essence as well as marrow. So in Chinese medicine, marrow doesn't really have much to do with our bone marrow. It has more to do with our brains for whatever reason. I don't know. But fun fact, bone marrow is amazing for nourishing your brain. So the marrow relates to memory, concentration, as well as restorative sleep. It is a very yin sort of substance, because if you look at it, it's very collagenous-y and slippery. So yeah, any sort of marrow in your diet. So collagenous bone broth or marrow. I just love marrow straight from the bone. It's just butter to me. But I one time I went to Mexico and I ate brain marrow as well, or sheep's brain or something. But that's going to help with sleep. So when our essence is weak, so our essence, as I mentioned earlier, it's like our vitality, it's our youthfulness. So it naturally does decline with age, but overworking out, just putting yourself through system overload constantly is going to drain your essence and age you prematurely. So if our essence is weak due to that sort of lifestyle or due to just chronic illness or natural aging, sleep becomes light and fragmented and unrefreshing. And sometimes you'll wake up early. So I also felt like this was relevant in mentioning it because as we age, our essence naturally declines and our ability to stay asleep for longer periods also declines. It's really common for elderly people to only sleep 4, 5, maybe 6 hours in the night. So that's normal. There's nothing, in my opinion, super pathological within that, especially because a lot of them, they actually feel well rested with that. And to me, with my spiritual lens, I think it's a really beautiful testament to the fact that as we age, we are returning closer and closer to being of the spirit. There's less of that yin anchoring human blood substance to anchor us to the body. And it's if we are all gifted with the privilege of dying due to old age, then that's just a natural way of it, which I personally find to be very beautiful. So don't worry too much. Like, if I'm not sleeping well, because there's always going to be a spiritual aspect to everything if you want to give it. So like when I'm having a hard time sleeping, I'm usually in my luteal phase of my cycle within my period, and I'm getting towards this really deep phase of my cycle, which is my bleed. Like I am so freaking intuitive, so capable within creation and making decisions within that phase of my cycle. So if I'm not sleeping well in luteal, like I'm not worried too. I used to be like, oh my God, I need to sleep. And sometimes I'm like, fuck, I really need a good night's rest. But for the most part, I'm like taking advantage of like being awake. Okay, let's take this time to process, do some shadow work. Maybe I want to write my book. Maybe I want to practice some Kundalini. Like I make the best of my nights of insomnia if they come through. That being said, I really do prefer to have a good night's sleep consistently through my cycle because it just does me better to live and function in our masculine-based society. But let's go back to the kidneys. So the kidneys time is 5 to 7 p.m. To me, these hours are the most important hours when it comes to sleep. And let me tell you why. All day we go from waking up, spring, and go. So a summer all throughout the day. And then we hit this transitionary period of sunset. So that's our experience of fall throughout a 24-hour cycle. But a lot of us, we're driving home during that time and we have to, make sure the kids are getting ready for bed and make sure dinner's on the table and everything's cleaned up. And it's just another sort of summer. It's turned into this summer stage rather than this winding down stage. So this is a really great time to support the kidneys, whether that's through diet or herbs, or maybe you want to make yourself an adrenal cocktail. An adrenal cocktail is mixing, I think it's like half cup of some sort of citrus juice, orange juice, grapefruit juice, mixed with a quarter cup of coconut water, and making sure that it's real coconut water, not coconut flavored water, and a quarter teaspoon of salt. And if you want, you can add a half teaspoon of cream of tartar. So this would be a really great way to support the kidneys, and prepare the body for this next phase of entering winter. So I mentioned that the kidneys, the element is water, and the movement is softening, descending, and the season of life is winter. So we can't just jump from summer to winter. We have to experience a fall, an autumn, a descent of energy, a slowing down, and a moment of transition so that you can be ready to rest. So bedtime, guys, let's start thinking about it at 5 p.m. I'm not telling you to like go lay in bed and hang out like the, I think of the grandparents in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, but definitely start to ask yourself questions of like, can I put time limits on my phone? Can I change out my light bulb so that I'm not having that fluorescent lighting stimulating me? Things of the like. Can I have kidney nourishing foods? Blah, blah, blah. I think you're getting it. I don't have to go deeper into it. So those are the main organs in Chinese medicine that I would look at. And then just to quickly go over the lungs. The lung, it's relevant here because its time of day is 3 to 5 a.m. And that's when a lot of people wake up. A lot of people, that's when they're like, nope, I'm done. I can't go back to sleep. And so during this time, we should be in deep sleep. It also has to do with dreams and memory. Actually, what's kind of interesting is during this time of day, usually that's our last rounds of dreams. And if we remember our dreams during that time, then that typically means that this is something that's yet to be fully processed by the nervous system or the heart, and by like our conscious awareness. So the lungs are a tender organ, which means that they're easily affected by our emotions, especially grief and worry. The lungs also gather the way that they receive qi. So like our stomach receives qi from our food. Our lungs gather qi from the air that we breathe. So if our ability to gather this sort of qi, it's affected, then the heart won't be nourished because the heart relies on this qi from the lungs. And so things like sleep apnea, chronic weed smoking or vaping in general. Actually, to touch on the subject of weed and sleep, there's this study that came out that showed that in short term, THC can actually benefit sleep. However, through the long term, it disrupts REM. So that's just another thing where I think there's this disbalance within society of feeling like, you got to do it every night in order to get a good night's rest. And in the long run, it disrupts sleep, but also it puts heat in the lungs, which in turn is going to unanchor the Shen, the spirit, and cause yin deficiency heat, whatever you want to call it. Anything that's heat inducing in the body, whether that's smoking or spicy foods, is probably over the long term going to disrupt your sleep anyways. Congestion, maybe when you're sick and you have a cough, those are also factors that long term, if they're not addressed, they're going to lead to insomnia that's pretty tough to beat. And then the spleen, the last thing I'll mention is the spleen in Chinese medicine. I mean, there's a lot I could say, but what I'm going to just leave you with is the spleen in the stomach. They are our earth element organs, and the earth element is the center of everything. If the earth element is not properly nourished and grounded, it's going to bog down or steal from other elements, whether that's the element of the heart, the kidney, the liver, etc. Actually, I think the last thing that feels worth mentioning here is things that really will be common factors that disrupt people's sleep cycles is gonna say it, eating too late. Try to eat between that 5 to 7 window. Even I think 7 may be kind of on the later side because, our life force is preparing to go internal and be stored. So if you're having to digest a bunch of food, like in a Western aspect, your heart rate's going to go up, but your heart and all your other organ pathways are going to have to work hard to circulate that food to make sure that it goes through its proper process of being separated of what's clear qi, what's qi that's going to be used and circulated through the su li, and then what's qi that needs to go through that elimination process, eventually, to have an excrement. So don't eat too late and no midnight snacking. That completely disrupts your circadian rhythm and sleep cycles. Okay, so for this last little chunk of time, I'm going to talk about herbal formulas that are relevant to some of the patterns that I mentioned here. I want to start with my favorite formula, which is Swan Sao Ren Tong, also known as sour jujube decoction. So it's a formula, so it's a mixture of a bunch of herbs. I'm not going to get into what those are, but the pattern that it treats is liver blood deficiency with deficiency heat. Deficiency heat is another word for yin deficiency. So liver, yin, and blood deficiency. And if you were listening earlier, then you remember that a pattern that I experience is having that liver blood deficiency of having like those cramping tendons and ligaments. So nothing gets me a better night's sleep than some Swan Sao Ren Tong. I sleep all the way through the night. My body feels so deeply relaxed. It's like going on vacation when I go to bed and waking up and feeling so freaking refreshed. It will also help with that person who's having those crazy astral dreams because it's going to help anchor and nourish the blood as well as anchor the hun. All right, another formula that is super relevant and pretty mild in terms of formulas is Gui Pi Tong. So Gui Pi Tong is for a scenario where there's heart and spleen deficiency. In other words, the blood is not nourishing the shen. Somebody who would be a great candidate for Gui Pi Tong would be someone with a tendency to overthink, to worry, someone who's experiencing heart palpitations, poor memory, insomnia, dream-disturbed sleep, and fatigue. I would say Gui Pi Tong is like a hug when I take it, especially if I'm going through something really emotional. If I drink some Gui Pi Tong, it just helps take that edge off of it and it helps you feel really supported. And the reason for that is because it nourishes the blood. And when you're nourishing the blood, you're giving your body a hug in so many ways. So if you're depriving yourself, you're not eating nutrient-dense foods, you are kind of like leaving your body to the dust. So with that pattern that I mentioned before with the kidneys and the heart not communicating, what my keyword is I ask somebody, is it your body or is it your mind that's keeping you awake? That's usually what helps me distinguish whether I'm going to go for a Swan Sao Ren Tong sort of vibe or this vibe for this other formula, which is Tianwan Buxingdan. I know these formula names. You're like, what the fuck are you even saying, lady? I'm not going to write it in the show notes because that's just a lot of work for me. I got a full-time job, friends. But reach out and I can write the names down for you. And if anything, that's probably going to put a little bit of a barrier between you going out to immediately go and self-diagnose and buy these formulas. But Tianwan Buxingdan, it's for that kidney and heart not communicating. If somebody's telling me that their mind is waking them up and they're having a hard time falling asleep. So symptoms, well, rather, the pattern would be yin and blood deficiency failing to nourish the shen, as well as kidney yin failing to anchor the shen. So symptoms would be insomnia, heart palpitations, poor concentration, anxiety, forgetfulness, and dry mouth. This formula is super nourishing. It'll bring you to a deep sleep. I think this is the one formula that I woke up feeling a little bit groggy from. And I want to touch on the fact that, like, how similar, right? How similar are these symptoms that call for these formulas? And so a huge factor too that helps me distinguish what somebody needs is by listening to their pulse and looking at their tongue. Another formula that would actually really help with kidney and heart not communicating is a formula called Huanglian E Jiao Tong. So this is an interesting, actually, what it's called is Coptis and ass hide gelatin decoction. So E Jiao is gelatin. It's marrow, right? Just as I mentioned earlier. So this formula is for an excess pattern where there's a case of heart fire, and that fieriness that we say, it's like harassing the shen. So there's shen disturbance. So extreme restlessness, like you're unable to sleep for more than 2-3 hours at a time. Irritability, insomnia, dry mouth, a really red tongue, and like a thin, rapid pulse. So what this formula does is it calms the shen by clearing out fire and enriching yin. The last formula that I want to touch on that I find absolutely incredible for sleep, especially for someone with a liver pattern, it's actually a combination. I like to buy powdered formulas. So it's formulas that have been cooked down and then dehydrated and put into this powder form. So I like to make my own decoctions at home. And this combination is just like, has also become my sweet spot. And that is combining a formula called Xiaoyao San, also known as Free and Easy Wanderer. So Xiaoyao San has the action of nourishing digestion, which in turn nourishes the blood. It also works on moving qi, so it helps with that liver qi stagnation and alleviating stress. By nourishing the blood and moving qi, it alleviates stress. So like a running joke at school was keep calm and Xiaoyao San, because everybody's stressed out from overstudying, overwork, and so Xiaoyao San's really great for that. So I combined Xiaoyao San with another formula called Baishao Gansao Tong. Baishao is white peony flower and Gansao is licorice root. And together they are amazing for feeling like contracted and having spasms within the muscles. It's like a high dose of magnesium. And so the way that it does this is by nourishing liver blood. So here's this action, right? It's always about the blood here. And then the last thing that I like to add to that little decoction is an herb called mu li. And mu li is pulverized oyster shell. It is extremely sedative. It calms the heart, calms the shen, and it just anchors you down. And if you think about it, it's got this salty flavor that softens and descends, and actually it's really great as a digestive enzyme. But this formula, why I love it so much, is that it addresses the physical body, the blood, the digestive system. It addresses the energetic body, the qi, our life force, as well as our emotional body, our shen. And so it has this wonderful action of just getting my body and my mind, my spirit to be brought all the way down and ready for a beautiful fucking sleep. Okay. So that's all my formulas. That's all my information for now for sleep. I already feel slightly dissatisfied because I'm just scratching the surface with all of this. But I think this is giving you a good general idea of, sleep from a Chinese medicine perspective and how to start to listen to the whispers of your body, of your energy system, to understand where to go from here. So if you want some assistance, some help, feel free to reach out. We can talk about organizing a session. If you live in West Palm Beach, you can come to my clinic. I also do remote work, which will have more of a heavy emphasis on herbs, food therapy, and lifestyle counseling. Well, thank you so much for being here. I am literally going to go drink my herbs and go to bed. And if you gained something from this podcast, make sure to let me know. I love getting the feedback. If you don't want to reach out to me personally, you can always just do the classic and leave a 5-star review, share it with a friend, make sure you're subscribed. And but if you do want to reach out personally, you can find all my information in the show notes. All right, my friend, I will be feeling your energy the next time I'm behind this mic.